By the way, little secret for you and everybody else that might be listening. If you had a professor and you have some tough problem that is their expertise, even if they're a consultant, I guarantee you they're going to help you. She took it for the third time in my class, and she got an A. And I started talking to her, and I'm like, Ashley, this is working for you. And by the way, have you ever thought about supply chain? It's a little hidden secret. Professors do what they do for the love of knowledge and the love of helping students, and it's not going to stop. So they're a resource for your whole life, and if you use them, then you'll benefit.
I'm paraphrasing here, but when you say you want to bring Amazon to the mid-sized company, how are you yourself or your company staying on top of what the leaders are doing in terms of operations management? How are you finding out or just staying ahead of the curve so that you can bring it to the mid-sized company?
Yeah, I'm going to make a quick left turn, and then I'm going to come back here because people often ask me what I do, and I usually start off with saying, well, I've got 2 jobs. And they're like, well, how can you have 2 jobs? At this point in my career, I'm not working the 90 hours that I did when the first 15 years when, waking up at 2 a.m. was like, cool, I can work another few hours. I was excited about that. That's not the case anymore, but it's synergy. And so how do I personally do that? And that's where my job as a professor comes into play. And so I talk about my teaching. And that's an incredibly important part of being a professor. And an equally important part is doing academic research. And that's writing research articles that go in scholarly journals that nobody reads except mostly us professors or the people at Amazon and Google and Apple and all those other companies. And so basically, if you have a PhD, that means that you're into this type of stuff. And so I'm reading the things that academic researchers and corporate researchers are doing before the software ever gets made. And scientists from Amazon do publish. All of these companies, they do publish. Probably scientists from Apple publish the least, but even then they will get their information out there in the research literature, and we have to read it. And so that's kind of the nuts and bolts way that I can do that. That's the synergies, so that I don't have to work 90 hours a week, 2 times 45 in order to make my living as both a professor, a consultant, as you said, and as a speaker.
That makes a lot of sense. I never thought of it that way. So you mentioned the PhD was one part passion and another part wanting to bolster the consulting. People are more likely to go to a doctor versus just a random consultant or a true professional, and you have that credential in hand. So when we talk about you being a professor, was that a part or a decision that was partly made for the same reason, or was that a decision you made entirely due to you wanting to pursue your passion in teaching?
No, so I didn't have a passion in teaching. I was doing consulting, and I'll never forget this, Raj. I was on, if anybody's from St. Louis that's listening to this, 141 southbound can get backed up. So I was driving from my house in Chesterfield to, I have a little hobby called mixed martial arts. So I was going to my MMA school, which is in Fenton, and I was on 141, and it was total backup. And one of my colleagues called me, and he said, I found in town a part-time PhD program in supply chain management. He's like, Mitch, let's do it. He ended up not doing it, and I ended up doing it. And it's funny because the professors who now know I became a professor, but the professors saw right through me. By the way, I know the words. Anytime you talk to a professor, talk research and teaching, and I'm like, oh, I love research and teaching, but I hadn't really taught, and I didn't really know what research was, and they saw right through me, and because they tell me later, they're like, yeah, Mitch, we knew you just wanted to use it to kind of drive your consulting business a little further, but that was the primary motivator: is how can I, again, in the most base way, Raj. I remember 2 of my clients. And they own a distributor in Chicago, and they're both Harvard MBAs. One of them came from McKinsey, and anyway, Harvard MBA, so arguably the best business school in the world. And I have a MBA from a ranked school, but it's not Harvard. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, like, what do I have that they don't? And I said, what could I have that they don't? And all those things came together, and I decided to get a doctorate, a PhD in supply chain management as a differentiator. It turned out to be a driver of knowledge. You talked about how can I stay on top of not the latest trends, because we got to get there before the trends. And then, guess what? By the way, I did love research, and I do publish research, mostly in e-commerce supply chain network design. That's sort of a speciality of mine. And then, you get up in front of a classroom and you see a student, and you mentioned a company that I helped, not turn around, but helped tremendously. And I'll never forget, there was a student in the same situation. I won't say her last name, but Ashley's her first name. And it was business statistics. Oh, everybody hates that class, right? As soon as you say that word, we don't even call it that anymore. We call it analytics now. It sounds better, but it's still basically statistics. And she actually she took it for the third time in my class because the first two didn't work out. And she got an A. She got an F, a D, and then an A, which is a pretty good job. I mean, I think originally she was hoping for a C just so she could say I took it, but she got an A, and I started talking to her, and I'm like, Ashley, this is working for you. And by the way, have you ever thought about supply chain? I don't know, with marketing or finance. Like you said, nobody wakes up and says, I want my kid to be a supply chain professional. It's accounting, finance, marketing, management, maybe information systems. We almost never get that first thought. And she went into it and she excelled. Everything from that point forward was straight A's. I helped her get her first job out of college, which was a huge upgrade. She was working kind of an administrative type position. And, you made a difference in somebody's life. You grew somebody's knowledge and career. And that kind of started it. So I actually keep a list of people that I think I did that with, Raj. And it's not thousands, but after all these years, 10 years of doing it, I've got 19 people that I think to myself, you know what, I made a difference. I changed the trajectory of where they might have been going. Because I don't think Ashley, who is now an operations management manager and wants to be COO of a company, I'll give you your name, by the way, and maybe she can come here work at Storyboard because she's fantastic. Just to go back, that's how all those things kind of came together. So I did it for the profession, and I stayed for the love of the students and the research.
That's great to hear. This is a kind of a random question, but I've had some teachers or professors that I feel like made a mark on my life, but I've never reached out to them to say thanks because I don't know if they get bombarded by students just thanking them and they don't really want to hear it. Just for, you personally, do you like to hear that? Or I mean, I'm sure you like to hear it, but would you encourage an Ashley or the Ashleys of the world to go out and reach out to that person that made the difference?
I'm trying to think if, by the way, except for Ashley, who actually does do that, because she'll still call me with a question. And by the way, little secret for you and everybody else that might be listening, if you had a professor and you have some tough problem that is their expertise, even if they're a consultant, I guarantee you they're going to help you. And so I helped her work through something that people pay me in the consulting business to help because she was my student. But for the most part, you lose touch, and that's okay. No negative there. But if somebody was to get back in touch with me, or even 5-10 years later, and ask me for help getting a job, we're on it. It's a little hidden secret. Professors do what they do for the love of knowledge and the love of helping students, and it's not going to stop. So they're a resource for your whole life. And if you use them, then you'll benefit.
That's a very helpful tip, and I appreciate it. So the consulting, teaching, speaking, all of these things, there's synergy around all of them. The one piece that I'm still confused about, that I'm hoping you can shed some light on, because I'm not seeing the synergy, is when you started a food production company. That is the one outlier, in my opinion. Can you give some background on how that idea came about and when or where you were in your career overall when you started that company?
Sure. I think Supply Velocity, the consulting firm, was around 10 years old. By the way, there won't be any logic there other than, remembering that Willie was, company after company and doing this and hustling that. And I just thought, let's do number two. And I always think about starting a company and somewhere I read that the hardest part about getting started is getting started. And so I just thought, I'm just going to do it. Again, there were business reasons to do it. So consulting tends to be large projects, rather lumpy in demand, and the food business is, very small purchases, pretty steady demand. So there were reasons that I thought that from a pure cash flow perspective, this would be beneficial. But the part of me was just like, I want to do it, and so I'm going to do it, and let's just go do it. So there was no more thinking than that. I'm not sure that it should have more thinking than that.
Sure.
Because we just got started. When we started the third company, the software company, again, part of it was, should we, shouldn't we? You know what? Anytime I ask them, I ask myself that question, we should. And so it was really just nothing more than that.
The food production company was Andrea's Gluten-Free.
Yes.
Where's that company today? And what exactly is that company producing or doing?
Yeah, so this is kind of an interesting story. I would like to say that, and I mean this with all the greatest respect for Andrea. I've been married and continually married and happily married for 30 years now. It's our 30-year anniversary. We got married the year we moved to St. Louis, and yet I totally understand divorce, Raj, because and actually not only that, but I understand that you ever hear these couples that like right at the wedding, one of them says to themselves, "This is probably a mistake," or "I probably shouldn't do this." And so as Andrea, who had the food knowledge and the recipe and all the cooking know-how, and I thought I was going to bring the business experience, some fun knowledge of funding and financing, and launch the company. And I remember our first discussion was about packaging. And as we're like going back and forth on it, I'm just thinking to myself, wow, this is not synergy. This is not collaboration. And so we lasted about, 3 or 4 more years. I sold her my share. And I understand last year, the year before, she sold the company. So she kept it going as a gluten. It actually started out not as gluten-free. It started out as a candy company.
Okay.
Our candy happened to be gluten-free. And I learned that from talking to customers. That was my role, to go out and sell. And then it sort of morphed, and we realized that, hey, this gluten-free thing, that now this is 15 years ago. And so we were trying to get in on the front end of it. But as a partnership, we weren't great partners. And I had other things that I could do. I think I was starting my PhD right about then. So I was like, you know what, Andrea, this has got your name on it, even though technically I own more than you. Let's figure out a price and we'll work. By the way, I'm making it sound a little more harmonious than it actually was, but it all ended up fine. Andrea ran it, sold it, and good for her.